Hello, hello, internet friends, and welcome to the very first episode of Ceiling Rant, the podcast. If you're not already familiar with me, my name is Champagne, and I do this little thing on my IG stories called Ceiling Rant, and it basically just started off from me not wanting to be on camera, but having opinions on hot topics, having just tidbits of things on my noggin that I wanted to share. And so I started pointing my phone literally at the ceiling and just recording my thoughts. And folks online grew to love them so much, they started asking me for a podcast. So here I am delivering on that ask and delivering on that promise to you guys that I would do a podcast. Okay, so let's hop right into it. Oh, before I even do that, let me just plug for the folks who are not here because they already know me, and for the folks who don't know me, like I said, my name is Champagne. I am Champagne Renee on all platforms. If you like this podcast, feel free to follow it, follow me on all platforms. I would love to have you. We would love to have you. We have a lot of fun over here. All right, today's episode, I am 100% certain, especially if you're an eldest daughter, you are going to be triggered. You are going to feel some things. I encourage you to light a candle, have like whatever your calming drink is, because you're either going to want to cuss me smooth the fuck out, or you're going to have to pull out your journal and like write some things down. You're going to like really feel in touch with your feelings. We're going to kind of go there today. Okay, pause for dramatic effect. Okay, today's episode is going to be about why you should forgive your mom. And I feel like I already know this is going to trigger a large population of my audience. And you know what? Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's how we start this off. Maybe we start off triggered and then we kind of ease into like the softer side of Sears, okay? But here's the thing. This is a gentle nudge, right? And we're going to talk about what that means, because I think a lot of times people liken forgiveness to lack of accountability. And I think it's important that we remind ourselves and each other that you can forgive without condoning, right? You can forgive without accepting, right? Like you can understand where someone came from and why someone did something that they did, and also completely disagree with it and set boundaries and know that you don't want that type of behavior and that type of treatment in your life. So I'm kicking us off there, okay, so that you can know that this is very complex and we're going to get into like the duality of it, right? Because it's not just one-sided. It's a very gray area. So the inspiration for this episode actually comes from the internet, which honestly I feel like a lot of my inspiration to talk about like ceiling rants, to do ceiling rants in general, comes from, you know, what's going on in the internet culture, what's going on in the internet space. And lately I've been seeing a trend on TikTok, which by the way, I feel like TikTok is just in general way more emotionally evolved than Instagram is. Have you ever seen, like, if you've ever opened the comment section on an Instagram post or a reel where someone's being like emotionally vulnerable, it is the pits of fucking hell. Like people I feel like on IG are still very like, expectant of content on that platform to be very performative. And so when someone is trying to be genuine and authentic on Instagram in general, it can just open you up to chaos. I enjoy getting like kind of my community feeling from IG, because I know people there. You know, I know my people. I have my little hub, my little central hub of people. And I love you guys and we chat. But a lot of people are finding a lot more community on TikTok because it does seem a little bit more emotionally evolved. And this is one of the trends that I've been seeing on TikTok, is this whole, you know, as a child, I understand, but as a mother, I could never, or like I could never do that to my child, right? And it's kind of like this uprising of new mothers, right? Women who have had complicated relationships with their own mothers, who are saying, you know, does anyone else feel this way, where you got to a point where you felt like you could forgive or understand the things that your mother did when you were a child, and then you have your own children and you are like newly aghast, like how could you do this? How could she do this? Because the love that I feel for my child, I could never do this sort of thing. And that's what inspired this episode, because I think you have to forgive your mother more than once in your lifetime, right? In the cycle of your life. And I feel like this comes up frequently for people. I always talk to my friends who have kids about how I got through a lot of my trauma and did the therapy and did the work. And then I had kids and realized that I had to re-heal some of those old wounds because it hits different as a parent, right? And so this is kind of what this conversation springs from. And I really want to just talk about how it's so interesting that we get to a point where we realize that the Venn diagram that we create of like, okay, this is who I perceive my parents and specifically my mother as a woman. This is who I perceive my mother to be as a child. This is who she was to me. And this is who I perceive her to be now that I'm an adult. And you put those two circles together and you think in the center is the whole of who your mother is, but it's not an accurate depiction of who she is as a person. It's not an accurate Venn diagram, right? Those two things that meet in the middle represent your perception and not necessarily the reality of who she is. And so I'll use myself as an example with this. So in my Venn diagram of my mother, right, as a child, I saw her to be someone who was abusive, who was sometimes passively abusive, right, in the sense that she allowed certain things to happen to me and, witnessed it and did nothing, or in the sense that she was not protective and, was very much negligent, wasn't there. And, of course, there were some drug and alcohol usage and things like that, right? That's my perception as a child. As an adult, I saw her as a victim of circumstance and saw her as someone who was, albeit mean, right? And my young adult self perception was a little bit mean, a little bit harsh in my opinion now that I'm older. I viewed her as weak. And it was very much given like, girl, stand up. Like, what are you doing? You're chasing after these men. You're not paying attention to your children. I spent a lot of my teenage years into my early adolescence resenting my mother and being angry at her for not being able to get her shit together. And I think that that's the part where now reflecting back and now that I am a mother and now that I'm kind of in the throes of motherhood and have a second child as well, I am starting to understand and able to forgive a little bit more of that piece because I'm starting to understand that she quite literally did not have the tools and was not prepared to get her shit together. She wouldn't even know where to start. It's the equivalent of being angry at someone for not being able to think critically when they are functionally illiterate. They don't even know where to look for the question. Right? So it's like getting angry at someone for not asking questions and they don't even know what the question, they don't even know how to ask the question. Right? And when I kind of got to that level of unpacking my mother as a person, as opposed to just what she did to me, but also looking at it holistically as like, okay, what was her experience like as a human being, as a woman, as a person? Right? Because I think in order to fully understand a situation, you have to do that. There has to be a detachment that happens in some sense where you're able to at least attempt to look without bias. And then you can introduce your bias and then you can get real mad. But I try to look at things without bias as well to say, what would have motivated someone or what would have caused someone to make these decisions? And a lot of times decisions are not made out of hate or anger or, with the intent to hurt. Again, that doesn't negate the fact that it is hurtful, right? Impact over intent always. But my point is a lot of times people make these decisions that end up hurting, devastating their children, the people they love. So I'm talking to you in particular, right? The people in your life who have hurt and devastated and broken your heart, a lot of times, and this is a painful reality, the decisions that they made were not intended to hurt you. They were purely made out of comfort. It was just easier to make that choice, right? A lot of times it's just easier and people are indifferent, right? And I think we don't want to hear that because it's always been my opinion that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. It's to see or feel that someone just didn't care enough to think about how it would impact you. So I think there's two sides to that coin, right? I see that this may impact them, but it's the easier choice for me. And I'm not equipped to make the hard choice. Or I don't see how this is impacting the other person at all. I'm just only focused on me. Right? So there's two. There's the, kind of in tune, they know it might have an impact, and then someone who's just completely oblivious. And both can do extreme harm, and both have no ill intent. But circling back to what we said at the beginning here, right? That does not mean that they should be off the hook. That does not absolve anybody from accountability. But I also want to remind you, you cannot hold your mother accountable for her wrongdoings. Accountability is something only she can accept. She has to accept accountability. You cannot accept accountability for someone on their behalf. And no contact is not accountability. That's a boundary that you are setting to not allow that type of behavior in your life. And you can do that. You can go no contact. I've done it. I did it several times before my mother passed. But just, I want you to keep in mind that it is going to be very, very hard for you to reconcile your experiences if you are treating the no contact as if you are punishing your mother. Because here we are emotionally connecting, right, to that trauma and thinking that we are taking an action that is going to make them change their behavior, right? Going no contact does not make someone become accountable. You have to let go of that need to control and like cause them to change. There's no way for you to make them understand exactly the pain that they caused. The best path forward, and this is my opinion. I'm not a therapist. I'm just your friend on the internet that talks to the ceiling, okay? This is the ceiling rant. My personal opinion is it impedes progress when you think that you can now discipline a parent by going no contact, right? Sometimes it feels good to say, I'm never talking to you again. I hate you. Can't believe you did this to me, you bitch. Right? But that anger is an emotion that you're refusing to work through, and it's keeping you tied to that pain. You can't walk around angry forever, babes. Can't do it. No good. And I know what you may be saying. Okay, Champagne, how do we get here then? How do we forgive? Since you know every fucking thing, since you got your degree. And honestly, I cannot give you the answer to that because it's individualized, just like therapy is. And I'm not a therapist, right? I'm not licensed to tell you, give you steps to work through. I will say that forgiveness can look like you even opening up your mind to the possibility that maybe your mom didn't have the tool set she needed to effectively parent you. And maybe she wasn't ready to be a mom. And maybe she didn't have the ability to even think to reach out for resources. Right? I think a lot of times, specifically millennials, we are kind of unforgiving, but we have to remember that we newly have these resources, right? Like there was community back then, but at the tip of your fingertips, you couldn't just Google, when can I give my infant water, right? You had to go to the pediatrician. You know what I mean? Like you had to physically go to the doctor. We now have the ability to research, and we have full feeds on Instagram, TikTok, wherever you want to be, that will give you guidance on how to parent better. We have YouTube channels with professionals that we can watch, at the click of a button to help us through whatever new benchmark or milestone our kid is going through that we don't quite understand. And that's just, you can accidentally scroll upon that. Your algorithm could recognize that you're a parent and start feeding you parenting advice. Where the fuck were our parents going in the 80s and 90s when they needed parenting advice? To their raggedy ass parents. That's where they were going. You know what I mean? Like, and no offense to Mima and Papa, okay? I'm just saying, we have an advantageous, yeah, I said that right. I'm not going to second guess myself, an advantageous position as millennials and Gen Z that we have access to resources, numerous resources that we don't have to, that they aren't gate kept. We don't have to go to anybody to get to these resources. And yes, granted, your parents could have gone to a library and found a book and picked up the book and went and searched and, parenting methods. Who was doing that back then, right? Because if you think about what your life looks like now as a parent and how you have to multitask and the amount of things and the mental load, which I'm going to do a whole full episode on mental loads as a mother as well. But if you think about the mental load that you have, tell me when you would schedule into your day in between working, cleaning, getting your kid, taking the care tasks that you do for your child, feeding them, cooking, meal plan, grocery store, blah, 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 all the things that you do, laundry, folding up, that you would schedule in, go to the library, while it has the Dewey Decimal fucking system, and pulled out a reference to see where the parenting books are, and then walk down that, especially if you're a single mom, where you're going to take the kids with you to go to the library to go look up parenting books and go scan through the aisles and then sit down and then, okay, now I can read it, or maybe I can go rent it and take, or not rent it, but borrow it and take it home. And then now I have to find time to read the fucking book. You know what I mean? Like I feel like a lot of it was they didn't know better, so they couldn't do better. They could only do as good as the generation before them, a little bit better than the generation before them, right? Because they may not have known what gentle parenting was, but they knew like, oh, I didn't like it when like my mom beat me with a broomstick, so maybe I won't do that this time. You know what I mean? And it reminds me of that meme that I saw that was like, you know, just because my mother didn't break all of the generational curses doesn't mean that she didn't break any, right? I think about that a lot, especially in reference to the last conversation I had with my mother in person before she passed away. So my mom died of cancer in 2021, and she had never seen my son in person. And so we had just closed on this house that we live in now. And we decided, you know what, like, let's see if we can try to go out to California and see my mom and bring, you know, my eldest at the time. I hadn't had my second baby yet, so that she could see him before she passed away. Because at this point, she was on hospice. We knew that she you know, was going to be going soon. And in that conversation, and I wrote about this in the book, we talked about so many things. But before we ended up leaving, my mother looked to me. Just, I honestly, it was the most clear I've ever seen her face, her eyes, and said to me, "I'm sorry for everything I did to you." Bitch, when I tell you my jaw hit the fucking floor, I was like, huh? You know what I mean? And part of me was very much like, okay, so you knew, right? You knew this whole time that the things that you were doing were negatively impacting me. You knew. But like I was saying earlier, sometimes they know, but the choice that they made was the easier choice. It was the only choice they knew. It was the only thing they knew how to do. And it was easier. And I think in my mom's case, it's a combination of it was easier, and also she was prioritizing her need for love over the love that her children needed. Ooh, bars. But yeah, so that was like a very heavy hitter. And another part of me, after having ingested this and being like, oof, okay, so she knew that she was doing it, because a lot of my life, in order for me to communicate with my mom, because I'd gone on again, off again, no contact with her. I think the longest I went was a year. But before all of this, you know, when we did have those moments where we were able to reconnect, the only way that I was able to do that was to literally gaslight myself and be like, she had no idea. She just didn't know that what she was doing was harmful. She didn't know. And so this kind of wrecking ball that hit me right before she passed, of her saying, you know, I'm sorry for everything I did to you. And just the look on her face was like, yeah, I know, I really fucked this up. And, you know, what do you say to someone who's dying? You know what I mean? Like, because I had a half a mind to like cuss her out and be like, yeah, thank you, because you did this and this and this and this and that and this and this, and I almost never healed from that. And, you know, but also like I'm staring at this woman who has terminal cancer, and she's bald and she's thin and she can, you know, she can barely stand up. And I'm like angry at her because I'm like, how dare you wait until you're terminally ill and I can't cuss you out, because it would be wrong to say this to me. But also like, you know, thank you. Right. So I'm not living in delusions of grandeur, I think is what they say. I'm the queen of like having a reference in my head and not being able to articulate it properly. It's fine. We'll get there. Who cares? First episode. Anyway. You know, I no longer have that disillusionment, and I can see clearly. Now the rain is okay. Sorry. I can see clearly, you know, what it was and what it wasn't. So for me, forgiveness really looked like, okay, let's have a come to Jesus moment. This woman was severely ill-equipped, right, to be a mother. And I think, to be honest with you, I don't think anyone is fully prepared to be a parent, to be a mother specifically. Just the mental load, the physical exhaustion, the overstimulation, in addition to the identity issues that you have. But I think my mom in particular, I don't think that she should have had children. And she, I feel like, agreed with me on that to some extent. She was quite literally unable or unwilling, whichever option you choose to select, to prioritize her children's needs over her own. And those choices negatively impacted all of her children. And I think the way that I healed through it was identifying, if I had had the type of upbringing that she did, the type of access that she did, her intelligence, her experiences, the things that she prioritized, or, the things that shaped her reality, what choices would I have made? I think a lot of times we internalize first. So as a child, you think, what's wrong with me? Why don't you love me? Why won't you choose me? What's wrong with me, right? That's you're internalizing their actions. Then as we become adults, we go, what's wrong with you? You're the worst person ever. You're the worst person that's ever existed. You're a terrible person. You're a shit mother. And so that's as you grow older, right? You start to kind of develop that mentality, and that can be adolescence through early adulthood, even into late adulthood if you hold it in. I swear, I feel like sometimes it's hard. Trauma, sometimes you just really hold that in like a fart, okay? you have to release it, because it'll make your tummy hurt, okay? But I think we have to come to a realization that neither one of those perspectives are wholly true, right? It's not there was something wrong with you, and it's not they're the worst person in the world, right? Once you kind of get to that point to say, okay, both of these viewpoints are very extreme, then you can start to kind of work your way towards the middle and get to a point where you can accept that it happened, but not accept that behavior in the future, right? So forgiveness, but with boundaries. Forgiveness, but not a cop-out or, water under the bridge, forget it ever happened, right? Forgiving, not forgetting. But also not holding that anger in. So what does not forgiving look like? Well, you already know. If you think about your mom right now, or your relationship with your mom, how does that feel? That's what not forgiving looks like. And, I recognized early on that there were some long-term negative effects, long-term negative impacts, or, possibilities rather, of me deciding not to reconcile my emotions around my mom, right? Not necessarily reconcile with my mom, but to kind of have that come to Jesus moment, like we were talking about, and forgiving my mother. The long-term negative effects are almost as bad as the trauma itself, because you are continuing to perpetuate it. It's almost like reliving it. Some people do the thing where they decide to become the extreme opposite of whoever they thought their mother was, right? All right. Now you're completely devoid of any identity because you are afraid of becoming your mother. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy because your children now view that extreme and may choose to be the opposite. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, you are perpetuating a cycle because you are trying to force so hardly to avoid it. But moreover, I think the biggest reason why you should forgive your mom is because you are hating a version of her that no longer exists. That version no longer exists. And you can stay in that timestamp in your life, in that moment. You can stay in that pain if you want to, but it's going to continue to be painful. For as long as you decide to feel it, it's going to continue to be painful. And I think we don't want to recognize that we're hating a person that doesn't exist anymore, or we're angry at a person who doesn't exist anymore, because we feel like we're letting them get off the hook, right? If I acknowledge that you changed, that means I can't be angry anymore, right? Why do you want to stay angry? Why do you want to stay angry? I think we get to a point where we have to realize the anger is hurting us more than it's punishing the abuser. It's not doing us any good. I read something, I don't remember where I read this from, but it said holding in anger, saying angry at someone, forget how it was worded, is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And that is what you're doing every single day that you are choosing, because it's a choice. You know, and it's hard. I'm not saying this is the exact way that you need to forgive, right? There's no right way. There's no formula to it. But you are making a choice to be angry. I think we all make choices in that light, but it's difficult for us to accept that it's a choice, because then it makes us have to do something. If anger isn't a choice, then we don't have to do anything. We're the wronged party and we have no action to take. If anger is not a choice, now we have to get in some action. Now we have to start doing things, right? And we don't like how that feels. So, and I'm guilty of it too. And it feels like a call out. It feels like I'm like disrespecting you. Please don't beat my ass. You can't anyway. No, but I think we have to start, I think it starts with deciding not to be angry anymore. Deciding to explore what it looks like to not be angry. What would that look like? And how would that feel? And how would that positively impact your life? Because how is the anger impacting your life positively? It's not, right? And I think if nothing else, you can be selfish in your forgiveness and not selfless, if that's what you need to forgive. I think that it does you a great injustice to hold on to that. And you deserve better. You deserve better. You deserve to be treated better. So instead of waiting for someone else to treat you better, treat yourself better, right? Give yourself the internal environment that you need and that makes you happy. Make your insides happy. That sounded weird. Okay, well, that wraps up. Ending on that note, make your insides happy. That's the final note for the podcast. I hope that you guys enjoyed this first episode. You know, I know we were kind of all over the place. We stayed on topic as much as we possibly could. You guys know I'm a little bit chaotic, a little scatterbrained. If you don't know, now you know. But I appreciate you just hanging out with me. I hope you were able to like get a task done, or if you're like walking, you've walked for like 27 minutes now or something like that. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. I think you can leave comments if this is on Spotify. If not, shoot me a DM. Let me know what you thought of the first podcast. I would be so happy to hear it. I just love getting you guys' feedback. It makes me so happy because I do really pour my heart and like, I really do pour my heart into all of my content, especially content surrounding like trauma and healing and stuff. Because I love you guys and I want you to be happy. And, you know, I don't have to know each and every one of you to want you to be happy and to love you. I think you deserve it. I think everyone deserves it. And I just want to help in some way, you know, any way that I can, I want to help. So I hope that I was able to do that a little bit, even if it was just to help trigger you a little bit so you can cuss me out in your head and then go do some journaling later. I hope this did that. Anyway, I will talk to you guys next week. I'm going to try to keep doing this like Sundays at noon. If not Sundays, at bare minimum Sundays. Okay. Sundays, my right hand to the ceiling. How do people do that? Whatever. Scout's honor. Never been a scout. Scout's honor. We're doing this every Sunday. And yeah, I will catch you in the next one. Love you. Bye.